am a commoner, and a proud one at that. For to be a commoner means that the commons still exist. I found myself to be a commoner purely by the fact that I've never had a driver's license. So growing up, driving lessons were too expensive for my family or I to afford, so I caught rides and I walked everywhere. And upon moving to Greensboro, I also started riding the bus. So purely based on how I was getting around the world, I was all too often in the commons. Some would say a commoner was born. The commons themselves, they're a cultural or natural resource that are accessible to any member of a society. These natural resources include things like air, water, and earth. So, if you're breathing right now, you are my fellow commoner. And it's our duty to champion the continued existence and growth of the common in all of its forms. The commons themselves have a long and convoluted history that go back to when many of our societies were more agrarian in nature. And so the commons themselves were a shared body of land that people were dependent on for their herds and so on and so forth. Eventually, though, the commons began to become overgrazed, and the solution to this problem was privatization and private property. So people who had been together sharing this shared resource were now becoming more distant from each other. We were being disaggregated into these private spaces. The issue, though, is that not everyone had access even to these private spaces due to inequity. And so people were being pushed out of what were once commonly shared areas. And so I find at this time that the commons, it's like, where are they? What are they? And who are the commoners? Perhaps it's you. But I find also within the commons we have this issue of people, and we are trying to be common. But so we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so this is basically psychological theory of how people exist in the world. And so our physiological needs and our safety needs are our most basic needs. And according to Maslow, we need to fulfill these needs in order to move further up to meet our needs. The physiological needs include things like food, water, shelter, clothing, and so on. And just above that is safety. Safety is really interesting to me. And I think that a lot of people are stuck in safety. And I think that that's the case as individuals, but then also culturally. Because within safety is also fear and xenophobia, fear of the other. And so the other, the question is, who's your other? Maybe you're my other. But our fear, it's keeping us from belonging. And so at this point, I want to ask us this question. You know, as the commons are becoming more and more whittled down in size, as our lives revolve around private spaces more, this question that I'm wondering is, what do we have in common? And what do we have in the commons? It's a good question, right? I thought so. So in my work with the Greensboro Mural Project, I'm part of a team of artists who work to rebuild the commons by using murals. And so the Greensboro Mural Project was sprouted from an idea 6 years ago while my friend Kat and I were playing in the dirt. Yeah, I mean, this is normal things to have ideas that change the world. And so we were playing in the dirt one day, and we unearthed this shared bond, this shared idea that we didn't know, and we'd known each other for years by this point, but the shared idea that murals could be a tool for social justice and inclusion. And so we did something a little unorthodox at this point. We started talking to people, and we asked everyone we could one question: what would make Greensboro a healthy city? We asked 300 people this question. We asked children, bus drivers, people at festivals, walking down the street, literally anyone that wouldn't turn and run when they saw us with our clipboards coming. And as you can imagine, we got well over 300 responses, because health means so much, even just to one person. And so these responses, they varied from things like recycling, broccoli, a good job for my dad, a living wage, righting historical wrongs. one of my more favorite ones was there was a suggestion that every first Friday we close down Elm Street, which is the main street here in Greensboro, and have a 5,000-person dance party. I mean, what's more healthy than dancing? Come on. And so all of these responses aside, there's still one that sits with me more than any other all these years later. It was the response to this question from a 50-year-old man who had lived in Greensboro his whole life. And when I asked him what would make Greensboro a healthy city, his response was, "Oh, I'd never thought of that before." And there was a way that he was very perplexed that I even thought to ask him this question, as though he held a secret to the betterment of Greensboro, this community he'd been his whole life. And the thing is, I do believe that he holds the knowledge, that each of us holds the knowledge in relation to where we live, of how to make it better. We can have influence over the world around us. And so many of our murals, they have some kind of community engagement process, whether it's based around a question, a series of questions, or even one time, actually, one moment, this is the mural that resulted from everyone's answers. Wanted to show you all of the hard work. But so this one time, we decided actually just to go out into the public, and we started asking anyone who was walking by, "Hey, have you ever noticed this ugly wall?" And people would be like, "Huh, no, but it needs a little help." And we're like, "We agree." And that was where we found that commonality. And from there, we then were asking people passing by what they wanted to see on this wall. And our lead artist for that wall, Alyzza, took all of these responses, took them back, created some designs, and then from there, we took the designs back to the streets. We set up right in front of that wall again, and started asking people to vote on which design they wanted to see on the wall. And sometimes it was people who had given ideas the first time just because this was their natural way of transportation. This was their route. And so it was really great just to see that process happen. And I'm not going to lie, though, there was a crowd favorite pretty early on. But then multiple people started having the same suggestion. Why don't you merge these designs? And that's actually how we got this design. So this mural was designed right on that step. Yeah. Another mural that we're working on right now, it's going to be started painting tomorrow, is featuring wonderful women and fabulous femmes. And we decided that we wanted to do a mural that featured people who identify as women and people who are femme, so people who aren't necessarily identifying as women, but still experience misogyny and the same oppression that women experience. Because why not? And so what we ended up doing, because this mural has had a really interesting content generating process, is that we ended up having an open mic style event where people came and were able to nominate whatever woman or femme that they wanted to see in this mural and honored in that way. And it was great, because we had people being nominated from Buffy St. Marie, Octavia Spencer, Cynthia Brown. We had the Bennett Bells during the sit-ins. It was incredible, because how often do you get to go to an event, or like anywhere, where people are just hyping women and femmes? Probably not often. I'm just gonna go out on a limb. And so that was really exciting. And through this process, we ended up with 43 nominations. And from there, our team narrowed it down to 12. And those 12 people went up for a public nomination period, a public voting period. And 4 people came to the top with the most votes. So up until this point, we have so many people that are invested in the success of this mural. We have the people who nominated people. We have the people who donated, so they're both literally and figuratively invested. And then we have the people who also did the voting. And what's more is that we have the 4 people who are actually going to be featured in this mural who have endorsed it, because we asked them if we could use their images. So those 4 people, because I know you're curious, are Miss Major, who's a Stonewall elder, Mickey B., Bree Newsom, and Jesse Barber. I mean, talk about community-supported art. Really doesn't get much more to the point than that. But so another mural that we're working on, it's our Queer Ancestors mural, where we're interviewing people who are LGBTQ identified about who their queer ancestors are, or queeros, queer heroes. And we're creating podcasts and recording them. And so from there, the people who are also named as these ancestors, as these heroes, are then going to go on to be featured in a mural. And it's really important for us to do murals like this just because representation matters. To be able to see ourselves wrapped up in the public landscape, in the public narrative, is so crucial, especially at a time like now when we see so many people being actively kept out of the commons. Here in North Carolina with HB 2 and HB 142, transgender and gender nonconforming people are, our lives are being censored as to which bathrooms people can use. We see this also with the levels of police violence that occur disproportionately affecting Black and brown people. And one famous commoner whose life was ended in the commons at the hands of the police, he put it very well, and I'm talking about Eric Garner. His last words were, "I can't breathe." And so, as my fellow commoners, bonded by our breath, it is absolutely crucial for us to commit to transforming and rebuilding a commons that are affirming of everyone and seeing that this benefits each and every single one of us. By asking people questions, we're inviting them into our process. We're inviting them to co-create and to envision the world around us and what it could be, and in some cases, what it has been. So this is actually an image from our Underground Railroad and Civil Rights Mural community design session, where we invited people to do just that and contribute their ideas as to what the Civil Rights Movement or the Underground Railroad or a series of other words meant to them. And it doesn't stop there, though, because we invite people to paint with us, to get messy, no matter how nervous they are, because I just want to say this, bad art is a myth. And it keeps us from co-creating, and it keeps us from creating together. And so, a lot of the times when we're creating murals in public, people engage with us. Sometimes they'll honk their horns, they'll cheer. We've had people be like, "Can I drop my kids off?" And we're like, "If you're here, yes." And so one day, when we were doing a mural that was about home at a day center here in Greensboro that serves people who experience homelessness, houselessness, unemployment, and underemployment, two women were walking by, and we were almost done with the mural at this point, but they were walking by, pushing their baby carriages, and they stopped and asked if they could help. And we're like, yeah. We pointed them towards some paint, some brushes, and a part of the mural that needed to be finished. They got to it. There was a bunch of people painting. And when they were done, they were really excited, and they were like, "I can't wait to tell my kids about this mural that I worked on when they're older." And then off they went. And as soon as they were over the horizon, the lead artist came over to me, a little harried. Turns out the door and shutters weren't supposed to be purple. And he was going to have to paint them over. To which I said, "No, you can't. That's theirs. They created that. That's for their children. And we can't take that away from them." It's still purple. And so this is part of the process of building trust and belonging and ownership with a place. And so as I'm coming to the end of our time together now, I want us to go back to our fears and all that they create. These barriers, these walls between us, they keep us distanced. And I also want to invite us all to think again about the questions that I posed. What do we have in common? And what do we have in the commons? And as we're all sitting in reflection with these questions and their possible answers, I want to also encourage each and every single one of us, and this includes myself, to also begin to let down our walls. And I don't mean the physical walls that I've been talking about as far as painting, though we will take those if you've got them. But these walls that keep us separate. And as we do that, that is only when we can begin to go into the commons and reclaim them and rebuild them. For there, we can begin building bridges by painting walls.